Welcome. Today we'll journey through the evolution of social welfare policy in the US. We'll explore how societal shifts, politics, and historical events shaped these policies and how they continue to influence the present. One significant milestone was President Lyndon B. Johnson's War on Poverty. That was a transformative era in US history. So let's look into the origin and evolution of social welfare, beginning with its foundations. So here we have the early origins of social welfare. Social welfare traces its roots to England's transition from the agrarian to a wool-based economy. Key concepts emerged during this period, such as the distinction between the deserving poor, orphans and widows, and the non-deserving poor, like the vagrants. So taxes funded welfare and assistance to took on two different forms, such as outdoor relief, which offered aid in houses, in people getting their homes, and indoor relief, or workhouses. So English settlers brought these practices to America, creating overseers for the poor and enforcing residency requirements. So early American workhouses closely mirrored the English model, and it emphasized strict discipline for those seeking aid. So here we go into now the transformation, which happened in the 1800s. So as America industrialized in the 19th century, rural to urban migration caused overcrowding, poverty, and poor working conditions in cities. So this shift gave rise to private charities like the Charity Organization Society, which championed scientific charity, which offered, advice rather than material aid. And during the Progressive Era, settlement houses such as June Addams Hull House in Chicago became hubs for immigrants and rural migrant support. And it offered services like job training and education to combat the urban poverty issue. Then let's go into now the Great Depression. So when we're looking at the Great Depression and FDR's New Deal, the Great Depression marked a turning point with unemployment at 25%, millions faced poverty and homelessness in response to President Roosevelt's New Deal, which introduced emergency aid programs like the Work Progress Administration and long-term reforms, including the Social Security Act of 1935, which established unemployment insurance and retirement benefits. So this era reflected a sort of like a shift from rugged individualism to collective responsibility, with programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, which offered jobs and skill training as well. Now let's move into now we're at post-World War II and the Civil Rights era. So here, the post-war economic growth, this expanded social welfare, introducing programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Meanwhile, the civil rights movement exposed disparities in welfare access, so promoting President Lyndon B. Johnson's war on poverty. So an example of this legacy is the Head Start program. This program provides early education to low-income families. So programs like these highlighted the nation's commitment to reducing inequality. So let's go over now. We're into the modern challenges, right? And of politics and policies. So in the recent decades, societal changes have introduced new challenges for our social welfare. So an aging population has increased. That has increased demand on healthcare. Single parent households have highlighted the need for childcare support. and widening wealth gaps have fueled debates on welfare reform. Also, the COVID-19 pandemic now further exposed vulnerabilities, leading to emergency relief programs like stimulus checks, expanded unemployment benefits, and the Paycheck Protection Program for small businesses. Moving on, we're now looking at the political influence now on social welfare. So, presidents have shaped social welfare policies in unique ways, such as Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal, which emphasized federal intervention. We have Ronald Reagan, President Reagan, who focused on reducing dependency, and President Biden, who expanded aid during the COVID pandemic. Now, throughout history, debates over federal versus state control and entitlement programs versus self-reliance have shaped the landscape now for social welfare in America. So, as we were talking about with Lyndon B. Johnson, President Johnson's administration with the war on poverty, let's look at some of the major programs and their lasting impact because in the 1960s, nearly 40 million Americans lived in poverty despite economic growth. And, President Johnson declared an unconditional war on poverty. And this created a lot of transformative programs that reshaped the social contract. So let's look at some of these impacts that we're talking about for the war on poverty. So now, before the war on poverty, the Social Security Act made some incremental progress with this process of the war on poverty. So it extended benefits to dependents, survivors, and disability people who were disabled workers. So, however, there are still some contrasts between prosperity and deprivation, which inspiring action. And this is highlighted in John Kenneth Gilbreth's book, The Affluent Society. So when we're looking at different administrations, President Kennedy, he launched pilot programs like food stamps to pretty much, lay the groundwork for President Johnson's initiative. So here we are now looking at some of the background when we're talking about the war on poverty and also the New Deal. Many things came into play. So some of the key points we're looking at is Social Security Act expansion from the New Deal to the 1950s, right? So dependents and survivors were eligible for benefits. You have federal funding for public assistance to those who have severe disabilities. And you have the different civil rights movement also that was highlighted with the systemic inequalities. For example, Dr. Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream speech in 1963. This really underscored the economic and racial disparities. So, the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964 is really a good one to bring up right now because Johnson's Economic Opportunity Act, this declared a focus on rehabilitation over relief, which emphasized pretty much grassroots community actions programs. So, federal funding for local solutions and the participation of the poor in governance. So programs like Job Corps, Head Start, Volunteers in Service of to America were born. Neighborhood centers offered childcare, health clinics, and job assistance directly addressing poverty at the community level. So this was a really great initiative. Then we have the Great Society programs. And when we're looking at this, let's think about how the Great Society introduced some monumental reforms, including the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, now the Every Student, Succeed Act. We have the Food Stamp Program, now known as SNAP, Medicare and Medicaid, which remain really the pillar of U.S. healthcare. So these programs laid the foundation for today's social safety net, right? Helping millions achieve stability and security. So let's look at now the welfare rights movement. So there's some key features that I wanted to bring to your attention, which is the came alongside the civil rights, right, and the anti-war movement. And it also had some goals, which was to secure aid to families with dependents, and to advocate for better treatment of welfare recipients, because not everyone was, treated fairly once others found out they were receiving assistance. Also, you wanted to make sure that the demonstration and legal action and education benefits were being used and implemented for individuals who are in need of assistance. So, an example is the National Welfare Rights Organization, which helped and still do help families advocate for faster benefit approval. So, as always, there's challenges and there's criticism. So, while transformative, the war on poverty faced challenges such as, duplicated efforts, mismanagement, and accusation of racial exclusion. Insufficient funding relative to poverty scale also limited its reach on who they could help. So, community action agencies, for example, face resistance from local government, highlighting the complexities of systemic change. Now, when we're looking at the legacy of the war on poverty, so despite, all the criticism and challenges, many programs from this era did endure, including Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, and Head Start. So these initiatives continue to support millions of Americans today, even as modern challenges like wealth inequality persist. So, for example, community service block grants those have evolved to fund today's community action agencies, demonstrating the lasting impact of these policies. So, from its origin in England to modern America, social welfare policies reflect society ever evolving priorities and values. And the war on poverty marked a pivotal moment reshaping the nation's approach to welfare and creating a legacy that endures to this day. Thank you all for listening and joining me today as we explore the social welfare journey. And let's continue to reflect on how we can build a more equitable future together.